Okay. Our final speaker tonight is the ideal closer in this room and in this moment. Martin Barron retired as executive editor of the Washington Post in February 2021 after 8 years overseeing the Post's print and digital news operations and a staff that numbered, checks notes, 1,000 journalists. With Marty at the helm, the Post won 11 Pulitzer Prizes across various categories, including public service, national reporting, investigative reporting, and explanatory reporting. Given the devastating cuts to the Post's newsroom last week, we couldn't think of anyone we'd rather hear from more on the consequences for the paper, its readership, the community it serves, our industry, and our democracy. Please join me in welcoming Marty Barron. Thank you, pal. Good, okay, come on. Ready, quick. Marty, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
So the cuts happened on February 4th. Right. Said to be 1/3 of the journalists at the Post, but your former colleague Paul Farhi, reporting in the Washingtonian, says it may have been between 44 and 48% of journalists at the Post who were cut. Is that your understanding also?
I think it's about right, maybe about 45%. I'm not sure.
Extraordinary. So international reporting, sports, books, metro coverage, staff photography, among the areas of the paper's journalism either eliminated outright or gutted. You put out a statement that said, following the cuts, in part, this ranks among the darkest days in the history of one of the world's greatest news organizations. You also referred to it as a case of near-instant, self-inflicted brand destruction. Say more about that. We'll just sit here for 30 minutes and let you talk. Go ahead.
Generally, I'm a master of understatement, but I guess I wasn't in that instance.
Yeah, tell us what you really think. Right.
Well, first of all, don't you think you should have had an uplifting portion of this
program?
No. I mean,
we don't do uplifting, sorry.
I'm like, I bring you down even below the level you were just at.
Yeah.
So, look, I mean, the Post has a great history. It has a great heritage. It goes back 150 years, just about.
Right.
And it has a long-established mission of holding government to account and giving the American public the information it needs. It had set very high ambitions for itself, which I think it should do. And I think a lot of that has come to an end. So it's no longer setting high ambitions for itself. I think it is betrayed with this action and with the behavior of the owner, who previously was a good owner but has somehow changed. It has betrayed the core values, I believe, of the institution. I believe that the newsroom is continuing to do really excellent work, and I commend them for it. They've done it under the most difficult circumstances in so many different ways. But I think that this represents an incredibly sad, dispiriting moment for the Post, and I worry that the owner, neither the owner nor the current CEO, have established sort of a mission for the organization or laid out a strategy for recovering from this.
Yeah, I want to unpack all of that in the time that we have, but I want to begin with my colleague and your former colleague, Ashley Parker's piece in The Atlantic, which described this as the murder of the Washington Post. You told me I don't like that word murder. Right?
Yeah, nonviolent. I mean, I think the murder, yeah, I mean, it's doing huge damage to the Post. I worry that it might send it into a death spiral.
Yeah.
But the Post is still there.
Murder has finality to it, doesn't it?
Last I saw, yes.
Yeah.
So, good point, Evan.
Thank you.
Right, I mean, the Post is still there. I think there's still many talented people at the Post. I mean, I think one thing that comes out of this is just how deep the reservoir of talent at the Post has been. And there's still many talented people there, and I would expect them to continue to do really good work. They will do it, there will be less of it.
Yeah.
They will have less support. And I think they're going to be working in an environment, or so far are working in an environment where neither the owner nor the CEO has told them where they're going from here. And any organization, and particularly a journalistic organization, needs that kind of leadership, needs that vision, and certainly needs a strategy.
Yeah. You've referred to the owner whose name you've not said. Let's say his
Everybody,
Everyone in this
nobody
room,
knows yet.
I know. But let's say his name. His name is Jeff Bezos. He is the owner of the newspaper. You came to work at the Post under Don Graham, and it was 7 months in, correct? The paper was
Right.
The paper was sold.
That's correct.
Right. You wrote a whole book about your time at the Post, and were very complimentary of Jeff Bezos' ownership of the Post and treatment of you and protection of the entity, the institution, the journalism, the legacy, right? So I really want to understand from you what happened.
Right.
We had a conversation after your book came out on my PBS show. We talked for 30 minutes about how God, it was so great. You know, we didn't know what it was going to be like, but it turned out he was so supportive, and I mean, a total change.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he was a good owner, and I liked working for him, and I liked him, actually. He set out a clear strategy for the Post, which was very ambitious, that we should be no longer essentially a regional news organization with sort of covering politics at the national level, but that's about it.
Yeah.
He said we needed to be truly national, we needed to be international. We lived in a digital era. This gave us the opportunity to distribute our journalism everywhere around the country and everywhere around the world. And we should take advantage of that. And he was willing to invest in that, and he asked us to come up with a lot of initiatives. He laid out a clear strategy in that way. And then subsequent to that, we had a clear mission. And that's sort of implicit in the motto that we came up with, which was democracy dies in darkness. And he actually didn't call it a motto. He didn't want to call it a motto, call it a mission statement.
Mission.
And he supported us, and he defended us against, I mean, when we were covering Trump in 2015, when Trump entered the political landscape, Trump hated our coverage, of course, and he attacked Bezos. He knew he wasn't going to get anywhere just attacking us. We weren't going to do anything. So he tried to threaten Bezos. Talked about how Amazon, supposedly the Post was a lobbying organization for Amazon. Talked about how it was some sort of tax dodge for Bezos, all this complete, utter nonsense, of course.
Threatened to raise postal rates.
Said he was going to double postal rates.
Right.
Then it was triple postal rates. Then it was quadruple postal rates. There was clearly a careful study of postal rates. And then toward the end, of his first term, he intervened in a huge Defense Department contract, a $10 billion cloud computing contract that Amazon seemed likely to win, given that it was a pioneer in cloud computing, had already established relationships, very good relationships with the Defense Department, the intelligence agencies, all of that, and to make sure that it did not go to Amazon. And it didn't go to Amazon. And
you said $10 billion.
$10 billion, yeah. And then there was litigation after it, all that stuff. And in fact, Bezos, Amazon went to court challenging that decision, seeking the deposition of Donald Trump as president of the United States. That's what it was like at that time, and people forget about that. And he stood by us throughout that. He didn't cave at all. He defended us. He said that Trump's behavior was inappropriate for someone who aspired to be president and then who was president. And I once told him that there was a joke that the Post didn't cost him $250 million. It cost him $10,250 million.
Right.
And he laughed at that. I mean, he didn't seem troubled by it.
But didn't he proactively, Marty, as I remember you telling the story, when he arrived, he said, cover me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care.
He never interfered. He never interfered in our coverage. He said, you can cover Amazon, you can cover me like you cover anybody else. He never interfered at all in our coverage, and even though, obviously, it made an enemy out of Donald Trump. So what I think happened is that he thought Trump was gone. Like a lot of people thought Trump was gone, and hey, he rose again, and he was back. And 11 days before the election in 2024, Bezos made the decision not to run an editorial presidential endorsement. The staff, the opinion staff, which I wasn't associated with because I was in the news department, they had prepared one for Kamala Harris. And he killed it, and he said they weren't going to be doing presidential endorsements ever again, even though in the two previous presidential races, they had editorialized against Donald Trump, even to the point of saying he was like one of the worst presidents ever in the history of the United States. So he feared, I think, reprisals from Trump. Trump had saw him as a political enemy for one reason, the coverage of the Washington Post. Trump had promised vengeance against his political enemies, and it looked like he was going to follow through on that. And Bezos had a flavor of that toward the end because of that $10 billion contract. So I think he feared that Amazon, which is the source of his wealth, would be denied contracts by the federal government, or that the existing ones could be canceled, and that Blue Origin, his private space company, in which he invested like $1 billion a year over a long period of time, which was just at the cusp of having a successful launch into orbit of one of its rockets, and finally could begin to compete with SpaceX, which it had fallen way behind SpaceX. That would be largely dependent upon government contracts, and that Trump could have denied contracts to that. And so he felt he needed to repair his relationship with Donald Trump, and he set about doing that first with the cancellation of the editorial, then appearing on the stage during the inauguration, then acquiring the Melania, quote, documentary. Totally independent, I'm sure. She's just the executive producer, nothing more than that. And then they bought the rights to The Apprentice. And Trump actually, he said in a lawsuit that he brought against the New York Times that he gets 50% of the profits of The Apprentice. So whatever they paid for The Apprentice, and I don't know what the sum is, he probably gets 50% of that. Right. And then he changed the editorial pages completely. It said it had to conform to essentially his ideology, which is sort of a libertarian philosophy, but it was clearly moving to the right. He talked about supporting free markets and personal liberties. I'm really sure that none of the opinion columnists at the Post was opposed to personal liberties. I'm quite sure of that. So, but it was clear signal that he wanted to move it to the right, and basically that they weren't going to have essentially any writers who were to the left of center, even slightly to the left of center. And so that was how he dealt with it. I don't have any evidence, and I don't believe he's interfered at all in the news coverage of the Post. He doesn't. I wouldn't know about it. You would know about it because there would be a revolt among the staff.
People would be talking.
Absolutely. There would absolutely be a revolt.
Right.
And so I think that's what's happened. I don't believe the cuts are an effort, sort of something that he promised Donald Trump or anything like that. I think there are probably other reasons for that.
So when you referred in your statement following the cuts to, this was your quote, sickening efforts by Jeff Bezos to curry favor with Trump, you were not referring to these cuts as such an effort.
No, what I was referring to there is
all the preceding
all the preceding stuff that actually, look, they're in a hugely challenged environment, and the media environment is really difficult. I mean, difficult is an understatement. I mean, it's incredibly tumultuous. A lot of changes. I mean, just in the last 3 years with generative AI, that has changed the media environment dramatically. And so the Post faces all those challenges. It was losing money. They had overspent, I believe, at the time, just after I left, and thinking there was going to be more growth than there was, a whole bunch of complicated issues. But the decisions by Bezos to curry favor with Trump made things significantly worse, because when they canceled the editorial, the presidential endorsement, at least 250,000 people dropped their subscriptions instantaneously. Right. And then clearly more people dropped their subscription, maybe 75, 100,000, I don't know the exact numbers. Right. But because of the subsequent changes in the opinion pages, and that probably has been a slow decline.
Yeah. So you said that there's no plan. There has not been an announced plan for the Post going forward. Actually, the statement that Jeff Bezos did make following the cuts, I at least took it to be a statement of what he believed, at least in principle, might be a driver. Our readers give us a roadmap to success. The data tells us what is valuable and where to focus. This is Jeff Bezos talking about the strategy for the Post going forward. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, it wasn't all that inspirational. And I would say that I could get more inspiration out of a, message in a fortune cookie. But
you could say that.
I could say that. In fact, I just did. Look, I mean, it's weird. I mean, look, you have to have metrics to run a business. You have to have data. It's incredibly important. But you got to know who you are. What is your own identity? What is your mission? And that suggests that, well, we don't really know. We'll let the data tell us.
Give them what they want.
Sure, and it's like saying we're going to set sail, and we'll let the winds tell us where we're supposed to go. And then you crash on the rocky shore. And as opposed to saying, no, this is the destination, this is where we want to go, and we're going to use the wind to help us get there. And so I think it was an uninspired statement. And what they need to do, one of the things they need to do is indicate to the staff, signal to the staff, here's where we want to go, here's who we are, in the same way that Bezos did it when he first bought the Post.
Yeah. And by the way, not just to the staff, but to us as readers.
Absolutely.
Right? If we're going to stick with the paper, it'd be nice to know what the plan is.
Nice to know, who are you? What do you stand for? And ideally, you would be standing for what you said you stood for, which is implicit in democracy dies in darkness. You stand for supporting democracy in this country and doing everything journalistically you can to support it.
To support it. Will Lewis, CEO of the paper, hired by Jeff Bezos.
Was. He's now out.
No, was.
Okay.
Has been removed.
Best news all week. He's
Is
gone.
that right? Out of his job. It is said that at a time when there are no bridges too far, him being at the Super Bowl red carpet pre-event on the day of the layoffs was a bridge too far even for Jeff Bezos.
Apparently, I mean, Jeff hasn't,
confirmed
no, he hasn't told me anything. He doesn't communicate with me. So in any event, I mean, at the time they announced these layoffs, he was not on the Zoom with the staff. It was just the executive editor, Matt Murray, and the HR person. And it turned out, and apparently Matt told people that, I don't know, Will Lewis, the CEO, had other things to do. And it turned out that actually a former reporter, a sports reporter for the Washington Post, who now works for The Athletic, which is part of the New York Times, captured Will Lewis in San Francisco at the NFL honors ceremony on the red carpet while the staff was being laid off.
Right.
I guess he thought that was leadership.
Well, I want you to characterize, in all seriousness, characterize his tenure, because he was a controversial figure, certainly within and without the Post, right?
He was. I mean, when he was hired, there was huge controversy about that, and a lot of reporting that went into it about he had come from sort of the Murdoch empire. But while he was there, they had a big phone hacking scandal in the UK. And the question, he was supposedly brought in to sort of fix the mess, but the question was, did he actually suppress information that law enforcement in the UK should have known about? And basically in order to protect Rupert Murdoch and others at the senior levels.
And during his time at the Post, there were certain initiatives that were announced that were supposedly his initiatives that, at least from my vantage point, didn't really go anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. So he announced that he was setting up they were going to set up a third newsroom to do sort of innovative things.
Yeah.
He constantly was talking about, we need to innovate. Of course we do. But he announced a third newsroom. The weird thing was that nobody knew what the second newsroom was. It was like, everybody was like, I mean, they were just completely mystified.
Have one newsroom.
Right, it's like, what happened to the second one? So, and it turned out that he was talking about the opinion department, which nobody in the United States, and I don't even know if in the UK they call the opinion department a newsroom because it's not covering the news. But in any event, once they figured that all out, he announced this third newsroom. It was explained in really gauzy terms. People didn't really know exactly what he was talking about. It was going to have to do with social media and all of that. And anyway, they named a senior editor in charge, very good person. And then they named an executive in charge. And 9 months later, essentially, the whole thing fell apart without any clear innovation taking place. I don't know. During these 2 years, I've asked everybody I know at the Post, can you tell me like one achievement of Will Lewis's? Like, tell me one. And they came up empty.
So the guy who's now been appointed on an interim basis to replace him was the CFO, Jeff D'Onofrio, who had been formerly running Tumblr. Is that right?
Yeah, that was one of his previous.
One of his previous things. Yeah. You don't know him?
I don't know. He was hired, I think, in June of last year.
Okay. What do you think about Matt Murray? You mentioned Matt Murray, who's been the executive editor.
I have a good relationship with Matt.
How's he acquitted himself over the last couple of years and in the middle of this?
Well, look, I mean, I have a lot of empathy for Matt because he was put out there to tell the whole staff about this. In fact, he had to write a note to readers about they were going to continue the print edition. That should be coming from a publisher, not from the editor. Right. And look, I mean, the coverage has been really good. I mean, they've done some great things. I mean, they've done a lot to hold this administration accountable. I mean, look, they had a great story just like a day or two before the announcement about the administration's use of administrative warrants as a way of intimidating people who objected to the administration's policies, particularly with regard to immigration. They were the ones who reported in the Caribbean that, you know, when one of these boats was blown up, there were 2 people hanging on for dear life, and then the Navy fired another missile when they couldn't do any damage to anybody. There were no threat to anybody. Right. And the question is, was that a war crime? And so that was the Washington Post that did that, even as they had been thrown out of the Pentagon, along with all of the Washington Post Defense Department reporters who did that, even though they'd been thrown out of the Pentagon because they're working their sources and they discovered this. And that's great reporting, and they continue to do that. And I just hope that they have the resources to deliver the same kind of reporting. So you're
supportive, I'm not asking this as a question because I know the answer, you're supportive of the journalism despite all
the news department. The editorials.
Well,
that's
I ask this
matter,
because in the time after the cuts, there's been this discussion of basically who lost the Post, who is responsible for this, and there's been Jeff Bezos is responsible, Will Lewis is responsible. The president is indirectly responsible because he was the one who set us all on a course of undermining faith and confidence in institutions like the Post, and that's hobbled the Post and others. Jerry Baker, the former editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, wrote a column the other day blaming the Post's journalists and journalism for this. This is what he wrote. The president's attacks on the media are indefensible and troubling, but it never seems to occur to his targets that the primary reason he gets away with them is that faith in the honesty of these institutions has already been devastated by their own tendentious work. His view is that the journalism of the Post is bad enough, biased enough, that's why the paper has been in trouble, and that was the cause of the distress we saw on the 4th.
Right. I read that column. And as you were citing it here, I was rolling my eyes. You couldn't see that, but I'll let you know I was rolling my eyes.
Noted.
And it's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. First of all, I mean, when Jerry was the editor of the Wall Street Journal, I always called him my best recruiter because we got so many talented journalists from the Wall Street Journal because under his leadership, they felt they couldn't write the truth, okay, of what they knew about the Trump administration. And incredibly talented people, some of whom now work for the Atlantic. I mean, look, I mean, the Post did its job. It held the administration accountable. It's the reason why, by the way, people decided to subscribe to the Post. We went from, when Bezos acquired us in October of 2013, we had just started a paywall, you know, asking for people to pay for access digitally, and we had 35,000 subscribers. By the time I left, we had almost 3 million subscribers to the Washington Post. Our traffic at one point exceeded that of the New York Times. And they came to us because they had confidence in the work that we did. You know, it was interesting, more recently, the current editor of the editorial page of the Post, he suggested that somehow this growth was all because of partisanship, that they came to us out of for partisan reasons. And, you know, what they really, it's so wrong to think that way. They came to us because they were worried that a president, that Donald Trump would abuse his power as president. They felt that somebody like that needed to be held accountable. They felt that the press had a critical role to play under the First Amendment of holding a president like that accountable, a president who was the most powerful person in the world, and they felt that the Post was doing an excellent job at that. And so then they supported the Washington Post. And I don't call that partisanship, I call that citizenship. That's understanding the role of the press in this country.
Yeah. A couple of times when we've been together over the last couple of years, I've said to you, you know, young people I worked with at one point, or people who call me and ask for advice professionally would say to me, I've got an opportunity to go to the Post. Should I go? And I asked you, what do you say to people, given your history with the Post, given what you've just observed? And you always said to me, unhesitatingly, I tell them to still go to work for the Post.
Yeah.
Do you still tell a kid who calls you, under these circumstances, take the job at the Post?
Well, nobody's called me lately, but the...
Should we run the simulation? I mean,
you could.
I'll be a young
Pretend you're
person, you be you.
pretend you're-
Exactly, right.
I don't like that. I'll be the young person, you be
Okay,
you.
yeah.
So,
But what would you tell, seriously, a young journalist who
yes,
thinks,
go.
I've got an opportunity at the
Of course,
Post?
go. I think that they're going to continue to do good work with fewer resources. They still have very talented people. I think it's an honor for any young journalist to work among them and to learn from them and to contribute to making the Post as good as it possibly can be. And they can do tremendously important work. So talented young people, if they have the opportunity to go to the Post, I believe they should go.
You should, yeah. Let's talk for a moment about what's lost as a consequence of these cuts. You know, there's been a lot of focus on the loss of Metro coverage, right? Today, the Baltimore Banner announced they were going to get into the business of covering Washington, D.C. sports in particular, given the fact that the sports coverage is disappearing. They've also announced previously they're going to go into Prince George's County to try to make up for some of the loss of the suburban coverage. There's been discussion of whether someone should start a nonprofit news organization to cover Washington, D.C., much like what has happened in other places where news deserts have been created, nonprofit news rushes in to fill that void. There's been some thought about people attempting to buy the Post from Jeff Bezos. I gather he's not interested in.
My understanding is that there have been at least a couple of overtures, and he's rejected.
He's rejected them. What does Washington, D.C. do now? If you're a resident of Washington, D.C., and you're losing all of this stuff, what's the answer?
Well, I hope somebody does come in to provide the coverage. I think it's a good idea that the Banner has now decided to cover Washington sports teams.
Yeah.
I actually just met this morning with Bob Cohn, who's the CEO of the Banner.
They're good.
Terrific. They're doing a great job. And he
work.
told me that this was coming up, and I thought it was a great thing. And they'll be hiring some incredibly talented, probably, sports journalists.
Possibly from the Post.
From the Washington Post. They couldn't do better than to hire for the incredibly talented sports journalists from the Post. As far as day-to-day, I mean, keep in mind, the Post didn't just cover the District of Columbia.
Right.
It covers Northern Virginia. It covers a good portion of Maryland. And this is the 6th or 7th most populous metropolitan area in the country. And the idea that you're going to cover that, they were left with about, I think, a dozen people to cover the entire area. And half of them are going to be shifted over to the national staff, which means maybe a half a dozen people covering the 6th most populous metropolitan area. It's crazy. And so somebody will move in. And there have been some people who've talked about doing that. And I hope they get the kind of good coverage of the metropolitan area that it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley's piece, which we referenced earlier, what it really said, among other things, was she grew up.
She grew up with the Post.
With the Post, and for her, the Post was her local paper.
Yeah, sure.
And she talked about how important it was to her and to her family for it to be the local paper, and she was mourning that aspect of what was lost.
Yeah.
Right? And there are probably a lot of other people in D.C. who do. So we have less than 3 minutes left, Marty. High-level question to end. Is journalism meeting the moment? Leave the question of the Post to the side. It's dangerous to describe times as unprecedented because immediately somebody will say, well, actually, no, these times are not really unprecedented. But we're living definitely in a weird and abnormal moment. Is journalism institutionally meeting that moment as you see it?
Well, I talk about journalism like writ large. I think a lot of journalists are meeting that moment. There's an incredible amount of great coverage, including from the Washington Post. There has been great coverage to date. I cited some of it, but hardly all of it. And from many other organizations, including the Atlantic. I got to get my plug in. And then, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal has done great work. Independent journalists have done great work. There's been a lot of fantastic work. We know so much about what's happening behind the scenes and beneath the surface of this administration, which is really the job of journalists to do. And most of it does come from traditional media, I have to say. And because they have the resources to do that. They have the staff to do it. They have the support. They have the legal backing to do this stuff because Trump is going to and does regularly threaten the press with lawsuits. So I worry about some news organizations, and I worry that ownership is a point of vulnerability. And wherever Trump can bring pressure on owners, he will. And we see that with what he's doing with the TV networks, and because you have the FCC, which has regulatory authority over this, and the feeling of owners like Jeff Bezos, who fears that Trump will deny contracts to the source of his wealth, which is Amazon, and the object of his passion, which is Blue Origin. And so I worry about that. But still, day to day, we're learning a lot about this administration, and the reporters are doing it under immense pressure, immense threats, obstruction like what's happened at the Defense Department that you were talking about before, and but a real commitment to the mission of journalism.
Yeah. You thought this was not going to be an upbeat night, but actually you just ended on an upbeat note, which I love. All right, good. Please give our friend Marty Barron a big hand. Thank you very much, Marty.
Thank you very much.
It was good as always. Thank you. Okay, great. All right. Everybody, thank you again for joining us. Let's give one more big hand to all of our speakers tonight: Georgia Fort, Marty Barron, Tom Nichols, Missy Ryan, and Nancy Youssef. Can you please join me in thanking the Atlantic's staff for helping to put on such a great event? Thank you. And again, thank you to the Knight Foundation. Thank you to the Knight Foundation for having us. Before you leave, we're going to put a QR code up. We'll ask you, if you are willing, please, to complete a short event survey. Your feedback will inform future stops on this tour. And if you're not an Atlantic subscriber, go to atlantic.com/AAA for a special subscription discount. Have a good evening. Please get home safely. We'll see you again. Thanks very much.